booster shots. And we've taken up this topic before on this show, given you various sides of that story, but it's moving quickly now. So the United States has okayed booster shots. That's a third dose of COVID-19 vaccine from September for everyone who got their first dose at least 8 months ago. They will favor those who are frontline workers, healthcare workers, those in nursing homes, those immunocompromised, and those who are elderly. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says there is no need for a booster dose, especially when large parts of the world don't even have 1 or 2 doses. Back home, Cyrus Poonawalla of the Serum Institute of India has been quoted as saying he believes there is a requirement for a booster dose in India 6 months after you get the first one. He himself has taken it, he says, and so have at least 7,000 of his employees at the Serum Institute of India. Is there a scientific need for this? I'm joined now by Dr. Jayaprakash Muliyil, who is head of the National Institute of Epidemiology and chairman of the Scientific Advisory Committee actually at the NIE. He's also one of the foremost epidemiologists of the country. Dr. Muliyil, pleasure to speak with you. Let me come straight to it. So Cyrus Poonawalla says he believes Indians do need a booster shot after 6 months. Do you think there is a scientific need for this?
That's an excellent question and pertinent question. And let me explain the situation in India. There's something very peculiar about India when compared to Western countries. We have a large proportion of people who have been infected by the real virus. Of this infection, majority are with the de-strained virus. Okay, that is the background, and all our discussion, if it is in that context, in a little short time, we can clarify that. The scientific evidence today shows, unlike what we were told early, when you get naturally infected, your immunity is robust and thankfully quite long-living. The most recent study on this issue from the Hong Kong University puts the probable duration for at least 5 years. That's one good news. Second thing is, we know all the strains so far have shown respect for immunity obtained from previous infection. And even in India, with this big second wave, previously infected people have been spared, majority of them. So we are in already a good commanding situation. So the question is, what happens to a person who has already been infected? He gets 1 dose of vaccine, already infected, okay? And we find something very beautiful happening. They all show not a primary response, they show a booster response. In other words, within hours, bodies start producing enough defenses. I use the word defenses because antibody alone is not a correlate of protection. Enough defenses to make sure, at least from the antibody perspective, he would jump within hours. And so I'm going to tell you that Indians are in a safe position. Now, there are some people who have only acquired immunity through vaccination. From their point of view, will the vaccination already received through 2 doses and never previously infected hold them good if they have an encounter with coronavirus? Well, you know what's happening. Many of them had this transient infection. And that means it is not protecting against infection, but so far it has been protecting against serious illness or death. So at the moment, I cannot see in Indian context a large-scale use of a booster dose at all. Okay, but there may be persons like those who had an organ transplant or those who have some way immunocompromised. In such special cases, their physicians may order a booster dose as and when required. But as a national program, I come across a situation where India needs to think of a booster dose as a public health strategy.
No, so then why in several countries, Dr. Muliyil, are they asking for a booster dose? I spoke earlier on the show about the United States, which will give booster dose from September. In fact, even in the UAE, for example, those who have taken 2 doses of the Chinese vaccine Sinopharm are required now to take a 3rd dose of Pfizer. So why are they doing this?
Remember, I told you this, we are different because we have a large amount of immunity already acquired from natural infection in India. About more than 70% are immune. Now, let us cross the border from UAE and go closer to Israel, where the best data is available. There are 2 things emerging there. Majority of them acquired their immunity through vaccination, RNA vaccine, and that gave them. But they have noticed 2 things. Number one, a lot of breakthrough infection. That is one side. The second thing is they seem to have a problem with the D variant. And the D variant has been infecting, and the protection is less for those who had early vaccination compared to recent vaccination. This is an important point to note. Vaccine has a waning immunity. This is the first time we are seeing an evidence to that account, which the natural infection now we believe do not have. So our situation is different. So certain countries are considering this issue, yes, but to us, what happens is majority of us are actually receiving not a first dose of vaccine when we take the vaccine. We are getting a dose of vaccine on previous infection. And that's why even 1 dose of vaccination seems to give so high level protection from the few studies that have come from India.
You know, but Dr. Muliyil, this is a generalized point that you're making, that a lot of Indians will have higher immunity because of the widespread Delta variant that hit us a few months ago. But what about at an individual level? Should people then check their antibodies, do tests to find out whether they need a booster dose?
That is one trap we may walk in. We may check your antibody level and see that they are falling. It is supposed to fall. It is supposed to fall because body is very frugal with respect to production of antibody because it has to take care of so many antigen. So when it is required, it produces. I also mentioned the peculiar thing we found among previously infected people when they get the first dose of vaccine, they get a booster response, which tells you, listen, they have long-lasting memory cells which can respond in an emergency. And we have found that previously infected people have special plasma cells which can respond deep in the bone marrow. So those who have acquired, those countries where large populations are acquired their immunity through natural infection have a protective layer. And on top of that, 2-dose vaccine seems to do quite well. Now you're asking, I'll ask the question you asked differently. Later on, after 1 or 2 years, do you think certain subsections of the population will require a booster? The truth is, I don't know the answer. But majority of us who have had infection, and that's a large proportion, would be fine with no vaccination or even a single dose vaccination, because the memory after natural immunity is natural infection is excellent.
Why do you think then vaccine manufacturers like Cyrus Poonawalla and others are saying you need a booster dose? I mean, do they have medical evidence of this? Because perhaps they're not scientists themselves in all cases, but why do you think they're pushing for booster dose? Is it because they are manufacturing vaccines and want to sell more?
Are you trying to get me in trouble? But the answer is, it is natural that if I have some product to sell, I would like people to use it more and more. Okay, now, the same thing happened in influenza. Those who got influenza, their immunity lasts for decades. But those who get vaccination, unfortunately, have a short-lived immunity after vaccination. Now, my question is that what is happening with these vaccines? I was hoping, and I've spoken about it in many fora, saying that because the natural immunity after disease is long lasting, we have every hope that the immunity following vaccination also will be long lasting. And some evidence suggests that. But the move by these groups now make me suspect that the thing is, they cannot tell us, watch out, your antibody is falling. That is a natural process. And that is not a reason why you should take a shot. We will take a shot when there is evidence to show you are actually vulnerable at a point in time in the future. At the moment, I don't think India should even consider thinking of booster doses. I already told you that in special cases, immunocompromised people, that prompts an extremely small subset of people. There, the physicians can make a decision based on the individual's immunopotential.
So let me ask you now about vaccinations in the context of children. We're still waiting for the full data to come out. We're still some time away before we start vaccinating young children. How crucial is that then? Considering that it's holding up a lot of things, kids are still not back in school. What's your view on that?
Well, this third wave may harm them more is a story somebody produced out of what interest, I don't know. Again, I am going to suspect some people who are interested in vaccinating children have created the story. There is no scientific basis for it. Children under 12, UK is not planning to vaccinate them. Why is that? The mortality in that age group, and remember in corona, the only thing that matters is serious disease and mortality, and it is extremely rare. Every case of a child that has been associated with a severe malignancy, leukemia, things like that. So children are pretty tough characters. They are taking care of themselves in the presence of corona. In fact, the infection rate among adults and children are equal and nothing has happened. But this particular, for example, you know a disease called chicken pox. It's harmless for children. In fact, we hope we'll get it when we are children, because above 40, it means serious disease. Supposing I were to now announce tomorrow, next wave of chicken pox is going to be dangerous to children. Don't you think I can expect a large sale of chicken pox vaccine, which we don't use in India normally? So public anxieties, public fears can easily be stimulated to have comfortable market leverage. I don't think that is fair. This whole story about child special wave was a construct of a weird imaginative mind. I don't think there is any scientific basis.
All
now,
right, thank you so much. Yes.
No, coming back to the children, the vaccination, you have to think about it very carefully. On one hand, children don't suffer from corona or die. On the other hand, a naturally acquired infection gives them lifelong immunity. Okay? And given that context, we should really consider whether it's a good policy to leave them alone, because it's like a mildest flu for them. So why have any, and side effects can occur even in them. So I think we have to think about it cautiously. And currently, we have problem with getting adequate vaccine. We have to still focus on the vulnerable group, which are elderly, those with comorbidities. And battle is not won yet, but we are about to win.
Thank you so much, Dr. Muliyil. Very important takeaways there from what Dr. Muliyil is saying. One, he believes we don't need a booster dose in India because we've had widespread exposure to Delta variant. That situation may change in those who are extremely immunocompromised and maybe after a couple of years. He also believes that vaccine for kids needs a little more pondering before we take a decision on that. Thank you so much for joining us. The process